Okay, hi everyone. So we're going to continue today on your limiting and excess reagent. So this is actually a continuation from your mole chapter. Okay, so from the first one. So if you take a look here, what is a limiting and what is an excess reagent? Okay, so in short, right, a limiting reagent is something that will always be completely reacted, which means there's nothing left, and basically there's not enough. Okay, but for an excess reagent, you are in excess, so you will not be completely reacted. You will always be remaining, right? Some remaining. In short, there's too much of it. Okay, so this is your limiting and excess reagent. So what are we going to talk about here? Okay, so why is this a important thing? Okay, because right, this limiting reagent that we find out will actually help us with the mole concept. Okay, which means we're going to talk about to be more direct, we're going to talk about the mole ratio. Okay, so we will always use your limiting reagent to compare the mole ratio. Okay, so let me just stress it out here. So we will use the limiting reagent to compare mole ratios. Okay, so what do I mean? Okay, I'll show you guys in just a bit. So if you flip behind, okay, there's a question here. Okay, so this question shows you how hydrogen reacts with oxygen to produce water. Okay, so to start off the question, they tell you I have 8 grams of hydrogen and 8 grams of oxygen. Okay, now tell me how many moles of water will I produce? Okay, so before you go on further, I want you to take note that they have given you two very special pieces of information. Okay, they have given you 8 grams of hydrogen and 8 grams of oxygen. So with this piece of information, you can actually calculate the moles. Okay, so if you can calculate the moles of your starting reactant, this is a hint to you that this is not a normal mole question that you have done previously. Okay, so if you can ever calculate the moles of your reactants, okay, which is both your reactants, then you need to be careful. Okay, so what do I mean? Okay, because you need to be able to determine, who is my limiting, who is my excess. Do I have too much of one of them or do I have too little of one of them? Okay, and which one it is. So if you take a look here, okay, what are we going to do? Okay, to find out who's the limiting and who's the excess, you're going to pay attention to the perspective of any reactant. Okay, just choose one. Okay, so in this case, if let's say you want to choose hydrogen, okay, how are you going to do it? Okay, so first you need to think about it. How many moles of hydrogen do we have? Okay, so based on that, okay, how many moles of oxygen do we actually need? And based on that, you need to check, okay, how many moles of oxygen do you currently have? Okay, so for example, right, over here, the moles of hydrogen that we have is currently 4, right? So for 4 to be fully reacted, okay, because you know that your hydrogen is to oxygen is a 2:1 ratio. So if you have 4 hydrogen, you will need 2 oxygen. You get the idea? So I need 2 moles. But do I actually have 2 moles? Okay, when you go and calculate, right, the amount of moles of oxygen that you have is actually 0.25. So what does this mean? Okay, you need 2 moles, but you only have 0.25. So you do not have enough. Okay, so not enough here. So what that means is because oxygen is not enough, this will be the limiting reagent. Okay, so if you consider the other perspective, you will also arrive at the same thing. Okay, so if you have no questions, okay, let me show you the next part. Okay, so just to apply. So to apply and continue this question, because we know that oxygen is the limiting reagent, okay, we will calculate the moles of oxygen to be 0.25 and we will use him for all mole ratio. So note how I didn't use hydrogen is to water. I use oxygen is to water. Okay, so over here you can see that your moles of H2O will also be 0.5 because of the 1:2 ratio, and then you can calculate the mass. Okay, so sometimes, right, in the other questions, they may ask you to do a little bit more, right, to tell me, oh, how much was remaining. Okay, so to calculate how much was remaining, you just calculate how much you have at the start minus of how much was reacted. Okay, so for example, right, we already calculated your moles of oxygen to be 0.25. To calculate the moles of hydrogen used based on the mole ratio of 1:2, it will be 0.5. Okay, so you just take original minus used, and you'll get your remaining. Okay, so if you're okay with this, okay, you guys can help me to try the questions. Okay, so you can guide, right now you can guide your students to do a question by question. Once you feel that they are able to handle this, you can actually give them multiple questions at once. Okay, so the questions here are not difficult, they are just meant to help them. Okay, but do pay attention to them when you give the first two questions as they start trying. Okay, so babysit them, just make sure that they are able to do it first before you let them do it fully by themselves. Okay, so if not, then that is it for this chapter.